Hey everybody, it's Mike Yao with Savage Kingdoms role-playing game and Fire in the Head Productions. And today's video is about Savage Kingdoms. So that's the poster over my left shoulder right there. So yeah, and there's Red Sun, my other tabletop role-playing game that I've been working on as well. But this video is about Savage Kingdoms. That poster doesn't show up very well, but it's there. Because a Savage Kingdoms 4th edition, as you may or may not know, is coming out. I know I've been talking about it for a year and a half, but I promise it is on its way. Hopefully Red Sun as well. But today is Savage Kingdoms Day. So today we're going to talk about skills, right? So I've already done a video and a couple in the past as well, and as well as a recent one about the overall game system, the D20 system that it uses. That's not the D20 system. It's just a D20. That's all it uses. The exploding 20 system and imploding 1 system that SK is, I hate to say famous for because it's a very small game, but I guess known for in small circles. But yeah, today's focus is about the talents, right? So I've already covered, like, I think attributes and the general callings, which are kind of like classes, but it's not a class-based system. It's a skill-based system, but it's a hybrid. So it's got what we call callings, and they kind of guide you into your general character type, but they're not as tight and exclusive as a class system would be. So anyway, let's go on with skills. Enough of that nonsense. So today we're going to talk about skills in Savage Kingdoms. There are, I think in previous videos I said there are 30 skills in the game. I think there's actually 28. Maybe I'll count them at some point. I'm just going to go over the skill list really quick, and then I'll just kind of go and touch on some of those. And this video won't be hugely long, hopefully. I know I always say that. So in alphabetical order on the character sheet, this is just a playtest character sheet, so it's not that fancy. But anyway, you can probably see skills on there. We have acrobatics, alchemy, animal handling, athletics, I'm going in alphabetical order in case you haven't noticed, brawling, crafting, disguise, endurance, healing arts, herbalism, language, lore, magical arts air, magical arts death, magical arts earth, magical arts fire, magical arts life, magical arts shadow, and magical arts water. Perception, performance, persuasion, resolve. Yeah, revolve is a skill. Resolve as a mental resolve. Sailing, sleight of hand, stealth, survival, weaponry, common melee or melee weaponry, and ranged weaponry or weaponry, ranged as it is listed on the character sheet. So that's pretty much it. But let me break it down in a little bit more detail and kind of how the skill system works. So going back to the top, acrobatics is based on agility, right? There are 6 attributes in Savage Kingdoms, very similar to D&D and Pathfinder, etc. We have agility, physique, vigor, intellect, magnetism, and willpower. Acrobatics is governed by agility, almost in all cases. You can in the game, kind of like in D&D 5th edition claims to have done. It doesn't really happen a lot, but you can do it. You can govern another ability score using a D&D term to another skill depending on the situation. Same with SK. Technically, you can pair another attribute with another skill if it makes sense within the context. But for the most part, acrobatics, I would say 98% of the time, is going to run off of agility. At least that's how it is on the character sheet. For example, if you have agility of, say your character has agility of +2, you already have +2 in acrobatics, but then you have something called skill levels. So skill levels are a lot of fun. A lot of people like this because you get skill points, and people remember back from like D&D 3.5 edition, and then tons of other games before that and after as well that aren't Dungeons and Dragons. The whole concept of skill points being, and it's anything that has points. In fact, in SK4E, you'll notice there's a lot of the character creation process. There's several steps that have points that you can spend because that's fun. It's like currency. It's like, oh, I got 5 points or 10 points to spend on these cool things that are listed. So not only in skills in Savage Kingdoms, you spend points on talents, which I'll get to in another video. You can spend points on cultural starting items and calling your own professional starting items. So I leaned into the point system a lot more in the 4th edition of Savage Kingdoms, even more than in the previous editions. But yeah, skill level is you start with a number of skills equal to skill points equal to 15 plus your intellect. So let's say this character had a +1 intellect, 16 skill points. That's in addition to the 10 skill points that you get in your calling, which have to be specifically spent on a list there. because it is a cult. That's, in other words, that's representing what your calling, your profession, your occupation would be guiding you into it. But the 15 points that you get at the end of character creation plus the intellect bonus, those are a general pool. You can spend them on whatever, which is kind of cool. So for example, say you wanted to put 2 points in acrobatics and you had a agility of +2, like I was mentioning earlier, you now have +4 in acrobatics, meaning that you add 4 to the d20 roll. Not that unusual in that aspect. So you roll a 12 +4, 16. 16 usually beats most difficulty ratings, right? That's the target number, or somewhere around the middle there. And then you might have, and on the character sheet, there's a place for totals right there. So I don't know if any of this makes sense. So you can see agility, these are all zeroed out for some reason when I printed it out. It put zeros in there because it's a form fillable sheet. Agility, so in this case, acrobatics grows off of agility. You can see right there. And so agility would be +2, not 0. In the case that we're making up, 2 skill levels, and then your total would go that right there. In this case that we're talking about is +4. And then you have something called skill specialties, which is not new to the game. However, the bonus is new. Previous editions, a skill specialty gave you an additional +1 to the skill. Now it's a +2. So I've leaned into skill specialties, making them hit a little bit harder and mean more, which I think works pretty well. The general math of the system now well, I wouldn't say all, but 90% is like +2s, +4s, +6, +8. So a lot of things go into increments of 2, which I think mathematically is easier to deal with. You still have your +1s. For example, say if you have an agility of +1 in acrobatics and you put no skill levels in there, you have a +1, right, to the die roll. So there are ways you can get +1s and +3s, obviously. But for the most part, situational modifiers are going to +2, +2, or -2, -4 kind of situation. It makes the math easier. And the playtesting has gone quite well. So the next skill would be alchemy. Alchemy is based on intellect. It's the same thing. So if your intellect, what did we say this guy's intellect was? +1. So he would be +1 in alchemy, just raw attribute wise without skill levels. Let's say he puts a skill level into it. So that's now, he would have a +2 to his die roll, right? Going back to specialties though, so say for example, oh yeah. So skill specialties, every culture, every human culture, or every non-human culture gets a few as well. You get to choose 4 free skill specialties as part of your culture, and that represents the culture or the ethnic group or nation's kind of leanings into what they are good at, right? Just like actual real world cultures tend to have. So, for example, you might get to choose from a specialty in horses or riding, or a specialty in battle axes, or a specialty in perception specialty in forests because your homeland is mostly shrouded in forest or whatever. I mean, there's a reason for them, obviously, in the game. So, but yeah, you get to choose 4 of those if you're human. Non-humans, I think, only get to choose 2, maybe 3 in some cases because they get some other abilities. So it kind of evens out. Yeah. So specialties are +2. For example, say acrobatics. Let's use our acrobatics example again. So we were saying he has a +4 agility, 2 skill levels in acrobatics. That's +4 total. And let's say that racially or culturally, he started with he got to choose. So one of his specialties that he chose from was balance, right? Like tight. This would be like tightrope walking. Like since I were going across a log or something. So, for example, so he would be anything that's acrobatics based. He would be at a +4 to the d20 roll. But in the case of balance, tightrope walking, going across the log, stuff like that, he would have a +6 to the die roll, right? Because he has the specialty in balance. So, alchemy, for example, the next one in the skill that I was talking about, our theoretical character has a +1 intellect. We were talking about. He put 1 skill level, or he or her into skill level 1, +2 total. And let's say culturally he did choose he did have an option for an alchemy specialty, and he chose oils, because usually your like alchemy specialties would be like oils, powders, dusts, elixirs, potions, or even poison, specializing in poison or acids or something like that. So if you were making your roll of alchemy, it'd be +2, but if it has something to do with what did I say, oils, then it would be +4 bonus. So yeah, so that's how it works. Um, The next skill is animal handling. That's based on magnetism. Works the same way otherwise. And so you would put it's your magnetism bonus or penalty plus whatever skill levels, if any, to come up with a total to add to the die roll. And then there's specialties in that as well. Animal handling specialties. Some examples might be dogs, uh, cats, horses, ravens. It can be almost anything. And in the playtest book, and when the core rule book finally gets published, hopefully here in a couple months at the most, um, it's got a whole all the skill sections in the skill chapter lists like lots of options that you could choose from for your skill specialties and stuff like that, and what the DRs would be, the difficulty ratings, the number you need to roll to succeed at whatever. Right, so animal handling is magnetism. Next is athletics. That is based on physique, almost in all cases. However, there's like a talent called agile climbing or agile climber, because athletics is usually when you're climbing, that's usually an athletics test. But in this case, if you have that talent, you can add your agility instead of your physique to climbing-based roles. I think there's even an agile swimmer. Maybe not. I know there's an agile rider. You can use your agility instead of your animal handling or instead of your magnetism, like when riding, commanding a beast. So right, what did I say? That was athletics, based on physique, plus whatever skill levels. Specialties in athletics: climbing, swimming, jumping, stuff like that. Brawling is its own skill, so that's good that it follows athletics, because in D&D 5th edition, athletics covers brawling, right? Unless you're a monk, then it's just an attack roll. Whatever you're trying to like grapple someone or even just punch them as not a monk, is an athletics check. Which I always thought, I mean, it's nice and simple, but I always thought it was kind of ridiculous that a really good swimmer is also suddenly a really good pugilist as well as a good climber. In the real world, typically doesn't work that way. I know I'm saying real world is fantasy. I get it, but anyway. So we have a different skill here called brawling. Brawling represents any kind of unarmed attack. So whether that's a punch or an elbow or a headbutt or a knee or a kick or even a grapple, a wrestling maneuver, that is all, anything that's unarmed is brawling. And that is based on physique, unless there is a talent called Agile Brawler, which allows you to use your agility instead of your physique for brawling. Because I think that makes sense, because there are certain martial arts that really lean more into dexterity and agility over physical strength. Although in truth, it's usually a bit of a both. But in what is called, what is more known as soft martial arts, that's really more agility based, and hard martial arts is probably more physique. If I were to have to kind of break it down into SK terms. And then the next skill is, that's next skill is crafting. That's based on intellect. There is a modification for that. I just added in a new talent like a couple of months ago to the playtest document. I think it's called Cunning Crafter, and or no, Nimble Crafter, and you can use your agility instead of your intellect for certain crafting um, tasks. Anything that's like deeper engineering and stuff obviously is intellect, but anything that's like I think it's anything that's DR 15 or less to make, like most pottery or like a horseshoe, like something fairly simple, you can use your agility instead of your intellect. That was crafting, right? That's based on intellect, normally. So disguise is the next skill on the list, going in alphabetical order, of course. Magnetism is based on magnetism because that's kind of force of personality. It's a little bit of acting, or a lot of acting is involved in disguise, so that's why I based it on magnetism. Probably not that unusual. I think there's a talent that allows you to use your intellect instead. I think it's called clever deceiver, cunning deceiver. That might be something else. Anyway, if I remember, I'll come back to it. Otherwise, don't worry about it. Disguise is normally based on magnetism. Endurance is based on vigor. So vigor is your constitution if you're more used to OSR D&D type games. That's how healthy and sort of tough you are. So it's called vigor. The Savage Kingdoms, that is endurance. That is the only skill based on vigor, by the way, other than the two magical arts that I'll get to shortly. Next skill on the list is healing arts. Healing arts is based on intellect, because you have to be a little smart to kind of know how to stop bleeding and to cure poisons and stuff like that. Healing arts, just a little note. Healing arts is pretty cool in the game because there's a lot of fantasy games that don't really allow, especially D&D is kind of the main offender. You can't really heal anyone other than just like stopping their bleeding or maybe diagnosing them, unless you have healing magic. Healing arts can be if you get to someone's injuries within an hour, or say after a combat or some other horrible thing that injures someone. You can do what's called treat fresh wounds, which is a task within healing arts. and you can actually give them pretty immediate health back. It's usually not a lot. It's usually between 2 and 4, which is not terrible. It's probably a little on the high end, honestly, higher than it probably should be. But it's there. So there is a mundane type of healing. It takes a while to do. It takes like half an hour. It's part of a 1 hour short rest, so to speak, wherein you can deal with 2 patients at one time. So you can look at it like you can do it with like one guy in 30 minutes and another guy, or maybe you're dealing with both patients back and forth for an hour. Is probably the better narrative way to look at it. The next skill is herbalism or herbalism. That is based on intellect as well, as you might imagine. And that is the ability to find herbs in the wild and know about them, whether they're poisonous or like cooking herbs and stuff like that. And there's a whole subsystem in the game where you can craft things out of herbalism. Herbs, it gets used more than it used to. I was a little disappointed that alchemy and herbalism wasn't as big a hit with players in previous editions. It seems to be maybe because I've made it somewhat easier to deal with than this. It seems like people are paying a little more attention to it in the fourth edition playtest, but we'll see. Anyway, it's there. And that is herbalism. So yeah, you can make concoctions out of herbs. It is somewhat related to alchemy, and I might have spoken this in a past video, in a game design video. And I almost did in fourth edition. I almost made herbalism and alchemy the same skill, but I just couldn't. And part of it is because I did even more deeper research, and the research kind of concluded what I sort of thought in the first place. So it really kind of confirmed that they're different enough. There are some overlap, and I have that in the game system. Like certain advanced concoctions, you really have to have training in both alchemy and herbalism. But as far as basic like witchcraft, herbcraft, hedge lore, I don't think that requires a lot of deeper training or knowledge in alchemy. So I think your kind of folklore people can make stuff out of berry juice and don't really have to have a deeper appreciation for alchemy. Because within the setting, and I think it's just pretty close to medieval alchemy, um, alchemy is almost, I don't want to call it a science because I really like preserving the Dark Ages sword and sorcery feel of the setting. But if there's any kind of science, quote unquote, and I know that it all technical, science is underlying a lot of this stuff. I get it. It would be alchemy, but it still has a mystical component to it, right? It's still like it's considered the eighth magic within the setting, within the lore. So yeah, so I feel like alchemy and herbalism are different enough, even though they're both based on intellect. They are still separate skills requiring different skill points to gain skill levels in different specialties. Moving on to language. Language is based on intellect, as you might imagine. Um, and it's now in the previous editions, every 2 skill levels that you put into language, you learned a language. And I've now made it 1 for 1, which I don't know if it's going to stay that way. It seems like learning one language like every time you increase, it seems like a lot might be too much. So we're on the fence with that one in the playtesting. I'm still kind of playtesting that. But so far, it's hasn't been that big a deal allowing that many languages. I mean, in the real world, there are people that speak 9, 10, 11 languages. What isn't there some woman in Russia or some guy in Germany or something speaks like 16 or something, 17? So not completely unheard of, but pretty rare. So we'll see what happens with language based on intellect. The next skill is lockpicking. That is based on agility, as you might imagine. Agility, there is a way you can do it through intellect, which kind of makes sense. Smart people would kind of know how to work, especially more complex locks. Um, that is called Puzzle Master. Puzzle Master does a couple things. It allows you to pick a lock with intellect because you kind of know like how puzzles work. It also gives you a bonus towards like riddles and like solving stuff like that. So it's a skill talent I don't see people take very often, but when they do, it's pretty cool. So that's lock picking. And normally you have to have a lock pick, something like actual tools for it, or else you'll have a -2 or -4 penalty for an improvised tool based on how accurate it is. So, for example, you're using a pin from a brooch, right? That might only be -2 because that's kind of close. But if you're trying to do it with like a spear tip or something, that's probably going to be a -4. Up to the GM, of course. Next skill is lore. Lore is a really good catch-all skill because it covers the specialties of lore, or like in D&D, it's like Arcana and religion. In fact, they're called almost the same thing. So specialties of lore would be arcane, history, religion, dragons, fae, demons, so you can go into all sorts of things. Astrology, I think. So yeah, lore is kind of your really good catch-all skill to like, do I know this thing or not? And or if I do I know anything about this weird creature that we're facing? It also works against people's renown. Like I say, if you run into an NPC, you might say, I want to roll a lore roll based on this guy's name that he like, see if I know who it is, know anything about him. And that formula is 25 minus that person's renown is the target number, the DR, the difficulty rating. So, for example, you meet an NPC that has a renown of 6, and you would need to roll a 19 or better on lore to have heard anything about this person. And if you succeed, you learn like one or two talents and weakness. Most importantly, you learn a couple of weaknesses the character has. All right, so now we get to the seven magical arts disciplines, and they are air, death, earth, fire, life, shadow, and water. So let me go back. Magical arts air is based on willpower. So all of the elemental ones, all the four elemental disciplines are based on willpower. So that would be air, earth, fire, and water. Magical arts death magic is based on vigor, which kind of makes sense because that's your health, right? And then life magic is also based on vigor, which I think is really cool. Is it's also dealing with a lot of like life essence, and I really enjoy the close relationship of life and death magic. So they're really far apart in some ways, but they're also very closely related. I think I was doing this because I almost imagine a yin yang seesaw kind of effect between the two. And then shadow magic is based on intellect. Magical art shadow, and that's because it's illusions and divinations and stuff. You have to be a little smarter with, a little cleverer, that sort of thing. It also deals with literal life and light and darkness type magics as well. Moving on past those seven disciplines, we've got perception. Perception is based on intellect, as you might imagine. There is fairly new talent now known as, I think it's called primal awareness. Primal, I think it's, no, wait, something like that. Primal awareness, primal perception, I think. Anyway, it allows you to use your willpower instead of your intellect. And I went back and forth on that one because I know a lot of people are thinking, well, willpower is wisdom, is just Mike's way of saying wisdom, and I'm like, well, not really. The reason why I put intellect covering intelligence and part of wisdom, like from D&D, is because I noticed through my many years of doing this that a lot of players get kind of a little bit confused with intellect and intelligence and wisdom. So I was just like, let's just put all the mental cunning and cleverness into intellect, and willpower is the component of your mental strength, right? Your literal willpower. But since it does maybe represent some part of wisdom, quote unquote, from like D&D, um, yeah, I came up with this talent, and it also explains why a lot of animals or creatures more connected to nature that aren't necessarily smart in a human sense, but they're still very aware of their environment. So it kind of helps cover that. So, and I think certain characters, particularly more savage or barbarian type characters, might have that. They might not have the book learning, but they are connected to they have they're woods wise, right? They have woodcraft. They're connected to the natural world more. So, right. The next skill would be performance. Performance is based on magnetism, as you would imagine. Magnetism is basically charisma from D&D. It's like it is your magnetism, your animal magnetism, or even just your regular magnetism. So it is force of personality and like leadership qualities. It's not really your looks. There's actually a whole talent for that. If you want to play a really attractive character, there's a talent called comeliness that you can buy. So you can literally, instead of just saying my character is really hot looking, and it's like, well, is he really with a -1 magnetism? Uh, so if you take comeliness, which you have to have at least a +1, +0 magnetism to even have, then you can literally do that and gain some game benefits from it. So as you can see, magnetism has a little bit to do with like a character's looks, but not too much. Moving on to persuasion. Persuasion is the next skill that's based on magnetism as well. That's probably pretty obvious. Your force of personality and that sort of thing, or charisma, is obviously a way to persuade people to do things. The specialties of persuasion, by the way, are deception or bluffing, intimidation, and diplomacy are like your main ones. There's a few like more obscure ones like perception urban, like in the cities. Like my characters better at dealing with people in an urban environment than say out in the wilderness, which makes total sense in some cultures and callings. Um, yeah, so and the reason I want to mention that is because those work slightly different. Like an intimidation, if you're trying to persuade someone through intimidation, you make the roll, and that sets the DR, which is the difficulty rating. That someone has to hit with a resolve. So they followed up with a resolve to see if they resist being intimidated. Um, and then deception would be opposed by, like in D&D, deception is opposed by insight, right? In this system, SK, persuasion, bluffing, or deception, same thing, really, is opposed by someone's perception, empathy, specialty. And if they don't have the specialty of empathy, which is like insight, that's just straight perception, right? So that's probably a good point. I should go back on. There is no insight type skill at all. That all stuff runs on a perception because it is a form of perception anyway. So moving on to that was persuasion, resolve, or as I said earlier in the video, revolve for some reason. Resolve is your mental resolve. By the way, I know there's a thing we call physical resolve, but this is specifically mental resolve, and the reason why it's based on willpower. So it's the only willpower-based skill other than the four elemental magical arts disciplines. So resolve is specialties of resolve would be like resisting charm, resisting fatigue, resisting sleep, resisting fear is a big one. So yeah, a lot of mental specialties or even spiritual specialties. Next skill is sailing. Sailing is based on intellect, as you probably can imagine, although there's a good argument for it being agility. And I've actually flipped that one to agility a few times, like depending on the case, what somebody was doing. I don't think there's an agile sailing talent yet. I haven't quite justified that one in my head yet, but maybe. So anyway, most of the time it's based on intellect, at least what's been printed on the character sheet. And then the next skill would be sleight of hand. We do have a sleight of hand skill, just like in D&D. That is pilfering, or palming an object, picking pockets. I like to use pilfer because it's more of a medieval term, or filching. Um, but it can also be like parlor tricks. What's it called? Legerdemain, I think is the more anglicized way of saying it. Chicanery, that sort of thing. So, yeah, sleight of hand. And that's based on agility, as you may probably imagine. The next skill, we only have four left, is stealth. Stealth is based on agility, as you can probably surmise. And it's also part of your movement. So when you're using stealth to move, you can only go half your mobility. Say, for example, let's say this character has a mobility of 7. So half is rounded down to 3. So you can only go 3 yards every action while moving using stealth. However, there's a talent called Swift Stealth or Quick Stealth. I think it's Quick Stealth actually, that allows you to use stealth at your normal movement, which is pretty cool. Especially if stealth to be like mostly terrain types: swamp, forest, mountains, plains, desert, etc. Also indoor, I see indoors, or urban a lot, or underground, stuff like that. So. Right. The next one is survival. Survival is a skill based on intellect, and I think there's a talent that allows you to use your willpower instead, but I haven't quite pulled the trigger on it yet. But yeah, most of the time it's your intellect, and survival is, like from most games, it's hunting and tracking and campfire making, and it covers kind of a lot of stuff actually, especially if you do a lot of travel, which I tend to run a lot of in my games because I just love that part of the game. It gets so ignored in many games, which is sad. The exploration pillar. Yeah, so it's really cool. So your specialties would be like I just said, like hunting, tracking, trapping. Could also be specific terrain types: forest, mountain, swamps, uh, whatever. Yeah, wastelands, steppes, tundra, something like that. The final two skills, the first of the final two skills is melee weaponry, or melee common or weaponry common melee, as it's listed on the character sheet. So melee weaponry is based on physique, because in most cases With most weapons, you're using physical brawn, right? However, there is a talent known as agile weaponry, which allows you to use your agility instead of your physique for light weapons. So light weapons are daggers, short sword. I think scimitar is considered a light. Hand axes and clubs, not heavy war clubs, but a regular club. So I think those are like the five sort of common light weapons to use your agility for. So very cool. And then the last skill is ranged weaponry, or weaponry common ranged, and that is based on agility, as you might imagine. And that is exactly what you probably figure it is. It's throwing daggers and javelins and shooting short bows, loosing arrows, long bows, crossbows, um, slings, yeah, all that sort of ranged weaponry. And as you might imagine, there is a talent that allows you to use your physique. It's called Mighty Ranged, but it only works on thrown weapons. Obviously, like being strong with a crossbow doesn't matter because the crossbow's strength. It's not the wielder strength. You might can make a case for like a long composite bow, someone being stronger, dealing more, but it's not. It's right now. It's just set up to be just thrown weapons only, which makes sense. You use your physique to throw a hand axe or a spear or a javelin, meaning that you can just beam this thing at people. So that's it. That's all the skills, and how this. And I'll go on to the next little section of the video before we close it out. I wanted to mention this. I mentioned skill specialties, right? We mentioned the attributes that govern each of the, I think, 28 skills, and then the skill levels. So I want to go more on the skill levels. So you can only start with up to skill level 2. In previous editions, you could start with skill level 3 in skills. And then in third edition, I had to make a little caveat. I'm like, well, that's kind of cool, but it's also like most people were just stacking everything like all like 5 skills with 3, and people were ignoring kind of the other skills, which is fine. But I was like, I feel like as a game designer, there's a better way to do that. So then in third edition, I came up with like you can only start with a number of skill level 3 skills equal to your intellect, or intellect, or 5 plus your intellect, I think is what it was. So if you start with, say your character has an average intellect plus 0, you could have 5 skills with skill level 5. But I thought that was a little artificial. So in fourth edition, it is now you can only start with skill level 2. So the highest skill level you can start with in any skill is 2 at character creation. However, there is a caveat. There is a talent known as Adept. The Adept talent allows you to start with an Adept level skill, which means level 3. Because the way skill levels go, skill level 1 and 2 is what's considered novice. Skill levels 3 and 4 is considered Adept. 5 and 6 is expert. 6 and 7 is, wait, I feel like I got off there somewhere. Adept, expert. The next couple ones are master, right? That would be 7 and 8. And then skill levels 9 and 10, which would be really rare. Those are grand mastery. So basically, every 2 skill levels is kind of a title of what it is. It doesn't really typically matter in the game, but the reason the talent is called adept is because it allows you to start with an adept level talent. So there's actually kind of a reason behind it. And so that allows you to start with. So every time you buy the talent, you can start with a skill that has skill level 3. Otherwise, you can only start with skill level 2, which is a novice thing. So, but since you're starting with you now start with up to +4 total attributes instead of +3, and skill specialties are now +2 instead of +1. The relative power level is still virtually the same, possibly even slightly better. I've had a playtester or two for some reason that I guess is not particularly great at math, who said that character power is a little weaker, and I'm like, no, mathematically it doesn't check out. When you consider that you now start with +4 total attributes instead of +3. And you have the adept talent if you really want to spend the talent points on that. And you have a +2 in specialties now. Yeah, the math actually checks out to being either really close to the way that, or slightly more powerful, more potent actually. Anyway, anything else that was said about skills? I talked about specialties. We talked about maximum skill level. Oh yeah, just to finish the thing on the maximum skill level. So in the advancement chart, there is still advancement chart. At advancement at 10 experience points, you hit the first advancement. Advancement meaning that's when you get 5 talent points, 5 skill points to spend on new talents and skills. And then you get +1 luck every advancement, and then every other advancement you get +1 renown. And what else do you? I think that's it. Yeah. So at these different advancements is when you can spend the points to advance or to level up. And then one of the caveats on each in the advancement chart too is maximum skill level. So there's a little listing for it. And you can hit maximum skill level 3 after advancement 2, I think. Yeah, you have to be advancement 2, which is 22 experience points. So at skill levels 3, 5, 7, and 9, you gain a skill specialty. So just to be clear, like I said, you get to start with a few depending on your culture, but then you earn some as you level up, so to speak, and different skills. Um, yeah, so that allows you to get certain skill levels. Like I've seen characters already, like at just advancement, like 3 or 4, that have like 3 or 4 skill specialties in the column, which is really great. Great. The only sort of drawback is that in the playtest character sheet we have this column and you have to write or type because this is actually form fillable. So it'll do it for you. But it does make the type pretty small when you have like 4 different specialties in there. Um, so a very minor problem, I would think. Maybe when the official character sheet gets printed, we'll see if we can allow for a little bit more space in there. But I think it's a fine problem to have because so far the new +2 skill specialty stuff has gone swimmingly and quite well actually, and everyone seems to be quite pleased for the most part. Oh, the great large point, actually, I would say. Oh yeah, last thing I'll add, because on the character sheet it says skill penalty right next to skill level. So skill, I don't know if you can see it on there, or just skill levels. Anyway, somewhere on here. Skill penalty, I think that's it. Anyway, somewhere there. Right above the skill section. What that means is certain armor. So skills that have an asterisk next to them, just like in previous editions, those are skills affected by wearing body armor. For example, acrobatics is one of them. Athletics, brawling, all 7 of the magical arts disciplines, and what's the last? Stealth. So all those skills are, say if you have like hard leather armor, which I think is -2 skill penalty. So whenever you make a skill roll with that while wearing that armor, one of the skills, like acrobatics or magical arts, you apply a -2 penalty to it because of the stiffness and slight weight of the armor. Um, yeah, when you start getting up to like heavy chain, it becomes like -4 and -5, and the highest armor in this sort of Dark Ages setting is kind of like half plate or plate mail or plated mail, and then you're looking at like around -6, and then I think there's even a -1 to mobility at that point. You can counteract that though by having like exceptional quality armor, or master crafted is even better. So there are ways to kind of skirt around that if you to some degree if you would choose to with your character. But anyway, I think it's enough about skills. Thanks, you guys, if you made it this far in the video. I know a lot of people don't watch these, but if you do, I do appreciate it. And check out Savage Kingdoms 4th Edition when it comes out through MadScribe Games, hopefully in the next couple months. And talk to you guys again soon. Thanks. Bye.